Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Buddhist Biohacker. My name is Lisa Gunshore. I am your host and Mystic Guide, and today we are diving into a powerful conversation called Reclaim Lost Energy with my dear friend and returning guest, Julie Hoyle. Julie is a spiritual teacher, author, and guide whose work is dedicated to helping people awaken to their true nature and live from that space of clarity and freedom. Her deep insights come from decades of direct experience as a mystic, dreamer, wisdom keeper, and her approach is always grounded, clear, and deeply compassionate. So it's time to call your energy back, and I'm really honored to share this conversation with you, Julie, and happy you're well and back for our postscript One Heart, One Earth experience.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm really thrilled to be here. As you know, I really love joining you whenever you do anything, and it's my honor. And thank you. That's quite the intro that you gave me. Let's hope I can live up to that, right?
Oh, you can. I have no doubt.
Yeah. So, I'd love to start, first of all, when we speak about reclaiming lost energy, it's easy to kind of get into the weeds with it and get lost. And the point as well is that it's not like we sit around or we have this instant recognition, oh, I've lost energy somewhere. But the key indicators are that we feel lacking in inspiration, we have no vitality, we feel depressed, we feel demotivated. I mean, you might have your own list of descriptors, but, those are the ones that I think most people can recognize straight away. And sometimes you can also go through phases where you feel really stuck and you don't know what's up, you don't know which way to turn. And again, that can be really frustrating. You know something's up, but you don't know where to look for it, right? So the goal really of this episode is to help people identify something that is often overlooked. And it's something I wanted to really drill down on today. And that is the energy that we give away when we keep seeking going and we're constantly looking for validation through spiritual teachers, courses, books, programs, you name it. The list is never ending. And I can really put my hand up and say, I was on that train for a long time. I mean, close to 30 years, on that whole kind of seeking. And believing that others knew better than I did. And I'm sure viewers can resonate with this. I'm sure you can have to resonate as well, and you've got your own stories around that. But I think it's a really big and common issue with spiritual seekers. And I wanted to focus on that because, obviously I would think that anyone who's interested in viewing anything on your channel is someone who has had some kind of shift of consciousness, awakening, whatever you want to call it. Otherwise, they really wouldn't be interested in any of this content. So it doesn't matter whether you're at the beginning phases of that, in the middle, or towards the end. It's always about the same thing. The seeking game is about looking outside yourself for validation, for support, for inspiration. And all of those things are really, it's great, fantastic. You can find a group or a community or a book or a teacher or a spiritual guide that can inspire you and motivate you and give you more tools and practices. But the key thing that is usually overlooked is that the resonance we feel within ourselves when we read something or when we hear a speaker or listen to a guru or an enlightened teacher teaching and giving these truths, there's a felt resonance, right? There's this vibration, there's a pulsation, there's a resonance, there's an all over feeling. Sometimes we feel like we want to cry. Sometimes we feel like, oh my God, she or he's saying exactly what I know it to be true, right? This is what this self-recognition is. It's this absolute recognition of that what we're hearing, feeling, and perceiving is authentic. But the thing that is often overlooked is that resonance within our own being is source itself resonating or vibrating with itself as source in the form of the seemingly other person. And I want to kind of dive into that because, as I said, I think that is often overlooked. And then what happens is seekers will transfer and give away their own direct knowing to the guru or the teacher, and they'll place him or her on a pedestal and think that he or she knows better than they do. And they don't realize it was their own self-recognition that was kind of vibrating in pulsation and resonance with the one that they were, hearing or reading about. So I think it'd be great to dive into that. You may have, something you want to share from your own experience with that, Lisa. But I think it's certainly come up a lot of times with the people that I've worked with over the last 20 plus years. And, amazing people, just brilliant, shining with light, just the most incredible wisdom, heartfelt, resonant. And they still transfer their own direct seeing onto a guru, a teacher, a teaching, a path, or a course or something like that.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into this and welcome everybody. Michelle, hi, welcome in. And please don't forget to share where you're from and also engage in this conversation. We want to hear from you too with your comments and your questions. And yeah, just listening to you speak, Julie, I think whether it's, a potent insight or reading from someone,
Mm-hmm.
or a connection with a guru, or, the other thing that comes up for me too is our loved ones, our beloveds, our relationships, that there are these moments where we feel seen.
Mm-hmm.
And it is very challenging to accept that we're seeing ourselves through them. And hi, Michelle's from Ohio. And hi, Rick. I'm so glad you're joining us from Washington. So yeah, I'm excited to get into this topic because I do think it's difficult for us to see ourselves.
Yes. And the thing that happens, if I can use the analogy of a lighthouse, when we have a shift of consciousness or an awakening, as in my case, it was a radical awakening, what happens is your whole kind of operating system is completely flooded with light. We become like this massive lighthouse that is sending out light in every direction. And obviously it affects every aspect of one's beingness and expression in the world. This light is so incredible and so luminous. And oftentimes we're so bedazzled by it, we don't necessarily see it. And it's other people that feel it and have a resonance for it, right? But still, even with this massive kind of download and shift, and there's this kind of awakening energy that moves through us, we can still tend to think that the light that we're putting out there and the resonance we're feeling in these great beings and enlightened masters that we're listening to, we're thinking it's them and we need to get more of what they have to be able to shine brighter. And of course, that isn't true at all. What they're doing is they're simply reflecting back to us our own inner knowing and our own internal resonance and vibration and pulsation of truth. And it's truth that recognizes truth. You cannot recognize truth from a place of ignorance or a place of contraction. It's the authentic resonance that we feel often in the heart. Sometimes it's like this all over sensation and pulsation. But only truth can recognize truth. And I'm speaking about truth with a capital T as opposed to, relative truth, like, the sky is blue, grass is green, and so on and so forth. This is the truth of one's beingness prior to the narrative, prior to the story. And I can guarantee anyone and everyone that comes onto your channel has felt this. You know, you feel this amazing kind of pulsation, and it's that energy that drives us on. So what I want to really kind of focus on is the places that we give our energy away because we believe that a guru or a teacher knows better than we do. So one very simple, practice viewers can do is, just ask the question, do some journaling, and, write a list of all the teachers, gurus, enlightened beings, or whatever. Write a list of all those people that you've felt resonance with, and ask yourself, what is it that they know more than me? What have they discovered that I have not found yet? And see what comes up. Because the truth is, really the truth, the absolute truth is, you wouldn't resonate with these, and assuming they're authentic, and what I'm speaking about is authentic beings, authentic teachers. There wouldn't be a resonance within you, in response to who they are and what they say, if it wasn't absolute truth, recognizing absolute truth. And there's nothing more that needs to be added to that other than the recognition that the place you are seeing, feeling, and perceiving from is source itself, and it doesn't need anything else adding to it.
So beautiful. Julie, one of the things I want to bring up with what you're saying about giving our power away to these teachers that's come up for me in my own journaling is, will I be chosen? I think there's this, not just a desire to be seen, but to be chosen, because we lack a sense of belonging. And then we look for that in our relationships, in our communities, in our teachers. We want to be seen, we want to be chosen, we want to be like selected. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that, because that's something that's come up for me in my own shadow work.
Yes. So I think that's a really common issue, that there's this longing to be seen. And of course, that really originates from a very early age, when we're born into the world, especially if we have parents who haven't woken to the truth of who they are. So they don't really see you. They see you through the lens of their own kind of perceptions. And of course, they can see you in terms of your character, your personality, the things that you like and don't like. And, all of those things on a kind of relative, personal sense and perspective. But unless they've recognized the truth of who they are deep within their own being, they're not going to see you, the authentic you, your true beingness. And it's that really kind of then pushes us onto a search, because we're looking for someone who can really see who we are. And all of that is fantastic. Certainly one of the things that I've felt absolutely 100% when I saw Bhagavan Nityananda in the lucid dream that I had in 1989, this absolute recognition that I knew him, that he knew me, really deep within my being, beyond time and space. There's this absolute kind of merging, this absolute recognition. And through that, I knew he was authentic. I felt the same when I was in the presence of Guru Mai. And there was something within her and the way she looked at me that was a little unnerving, because the thing is they see, great beings see everything, right? They see the shadow aspects that you might not even consciously acknowledge within yourself. So this clear seeing is evident, and we feel it. And the thing is that once we acknowledge this resonance with a great being, and we acknowledge that the place that we're seeing from is source itself, then of course we're able to see and validate others when they're looking to be seen. Because I'm guessing, and I'm sure I know, that a lot of people that come to you, Lisa, come from that pain point. They want someone to see them. They want someone to recognize who they are. They want someone to speak to their gifts, skills, and talents. And everybody longs for that. But there's also kind of an inherent fear of being seen as well. And this is why we often give our power away, because it takes maturity and it takes responsibility to stand in our own authentic knowingness, rather than continually looking. It's almost like looking for a parent, to kind of take care of us. And somehow we're hardwired for that. But I really, really want to, in this session today, I really want to emphasize the importance above everything of really living true to your authentic seeing, knowing, and feeling and perceiving, and live true to that rather than giving it away via courses and programs and gurus and all of those things. And, as I said, I do want to say that there's absolutely nothing wrong with having a guru or a teacher, or, that can be part of the process. It was certainly part of my process too. That's great. You can honor it. It has value. But at a certain point, you will be tasked with the challenge of recognizing that what you are seeing in him or her, or in the path you belong to, is your own. It's source itself looking through your eyes, and the place you are looking from and speaking from with respect to this true seeing is the same place as the guru you are putting on a pedestal, or a teacher that you're putting on a pedestal.
And I believe that an authentic teacher is always inviting you to become honest with yourself and become true to yourself. And, I think when we're dishonest with ourselves is how we give our power away. I feel like that not being honest with what we want, what we want in our life, what we want to create for ourselves, we go straight into placing blame, judgment, resentment. And that's where the energy, I think, depletes. I think that's where the fatigue comes from. I know in my own experience, like my fatigue has come from, projecting all these things outward versus getting honest with myself about what I really want and then speaking that truth. And I think the guru, the teacher, the program, like whatever you go through for your own self-discovery, I think it's really asking you to be honest with yourself. And when you become honest with yourself, all of the sudden there's all this Shakti, all this energy coming forward. I'm most creative, and all of my books, everything I've done comes from that place of when I become honest with myself and I look at my patterns, like that's what I'm sharing. And I think that's something that sticks in my mind with the Dalai Lama speaking. He shares these simple stories about his childhood, but they're always pointing to the truth of his humanness, his human nature. And I think that is why he has the Shakti and the vitality that he has, is that honesty with yourself. And so one of the questions I think is worth asking yourself is, where am I not being honest with myself? And instead I'm blaming somebody else, because we also can blame our teachers.
Yes.
Rather than blame ourselves. And that gets depleting very quickly.
Yes. And that's a really great point, because I certainly saw that when I spent time at an ashram in India. I was there for 18 months on staff, and also spent time at an ashram in New York. And I have to say, it was a real eye-opener, because it was clearly evident that there were many people staying there and were terrified to leave. They were afraid that they would be asked to leave. And these are people that had been there for, a few years. And they were afraid that they would be asked to leave. And they were afraid to have to, relocate and, be in the world and kind of live a normal life. There were many women there who were, I could feel it energetically. They were there kind of hiding. They really, wanted to be in a relationship with someone. but maybe felt like their time had gone. So instead, they were putting all that time and energy into the practices and into kind of trying to stay under the radar so that they wouldn't be asked to leave. And it was clear that, their humanity, their humanness was not being honored and valued. And they were kind of giving that up and giving their needs up, the need for a partner, the need for a family, the need for being in the world and creating their, a salary, working, interacting with people. And they were, opting to try and kind of hide rather than actually own up to what they were feeling and what they were longing for. And then the same was true after, I wasn't there that long, but after I left, I had lots of people from the ashram reaching out, asking for sessions and so on and so forth. And many of them were really angry. They were angry, they were frustrated that they were having to kind of live kind of a monastic life. They wanted to be in relationship, but they were afraid to create change. So, obviously, part of everything that we're speaking about is about having the honesty and the courage to speak to the things in your life, in your human expression, that are calling for you to take note of. So if you're lonely, it's okay. It's okay to admit you want to be in a partnership. It's okay to say you want to find a husband, or you want to have a baby, or whatever the story is, or you can't stand your job, you want to quit your job. There's absolutely nothing wrong with improving the story, but to improve your story, you have to honor it. You have to honor your humanity. And again, this is where, energy can be lost because, we're oftentimes not even conscious of what we've been trying to do. We can repress these innate needs that we have in favor of thinking, oh, I can meditate. Let me meditate for an hour and I won't feel this frustration. I don't know what the root of the frustration is. And often frustration, and any irritation or anything that anxiety, whatever's coming up, is really they're all gifts because they're signals telling us that there's something that needs to be looked at and we're opting not to look. And we're, oftentimes, because you can meditate to death, right? And do the practices to death. But if you're doing it just to manage frustration, irritation, or whatever you want to call it, then you're doing yourself a disservice and you're doing the world a disservice because you're not taking care of your basic human needs and you're not living true to your authentic expression, your natural way of expressing.
That's such a good point because you can't meditate your frustrations away. You can manage what your frustrations do to your nervous system through meditation, but eventually they come back. And I think, what I'd offer is asking questions of, when jealousy, anger, and resentment arise, what am I angry, jealous, or resentful of? Because what it's pointing to is what you want to create in your life. And those are the things that are depleting you.
Yes.
I'm jealous that woman is skinny. I'm not creating for myself health and vitality. How do I make that a priority? And then that gets into looking at why are we denying our needs? Just like you're saying, Julie, we deny what we need, what we want. We deny taking care of ourselves because we might be over functioning or there might be something else that's happening. And so, going back to what you're saying about, the guru or the teacher, when we see those beings, oftentimes what they're reflecting back to us, I think, is that vitality, that vitality of living in your truth and that wellness that comes with that. And I think it can become, we want that. And we have to look at how we create that for ourselves. And it's not an easy thing to unravel, I don't think, because sometimes we don't really know what we want. I think that can be challenging. And I'm sure you've had this too, Julie, with clients that come and, sometimes I think a lot of times people are coming for a reading because they simply don't even know who they are, what they want anymore. And so there's this unraveling that wants to occur just to get to the root of who you are and what you want to create. And we have to sift through years of patterns and resentment and anger and frustration to get to that place to see our true self, which is why a guru is so powerful, because when a teacher looks at you from that place of truth, it cuts through all that bullshit very quickly, you know, versus having to unravel it. But either way, it's our responsibility as individuals to unravel it.
Yes, and really do the work. You know, one of the reasons I emphasize so much in the work that I do, you know, with shadow work, is that that allows you to be in a place of authenticity. You know, because part of the reason people come and they really don't know what they want, they don't know who they are, they don't even know what their gifts, skills, and talents are or what they look like, is because they've been managing everything and pushing everything down in favor of, you know, conforming to either their family's demands or what they perceive societal demands to be. And they're not, from the outset, they're not being honest with themselves and what they're really feeling inside. So you can, you know, if you do that for long enough, then you're going to be like almost like a robot and not able to feel anything. And so used to turning away from your own authentic beingness, you just don't know what that even feels like anymore. So I know a lot of the work you do, a lot of work that I do is really about kind of shining light on those places that are closed off and just kind of gently pointing to those and giving people kind of simple practices that they can utilize to pull these old beliefs out by the root and then be able to move forward in their lives and to feel again. Because certainly one of the big indicators of you know, having energy that's dispersed elsewhere and not available to you is when you can't feel, you know, when all your sense of and quality of feeling is emotionally isn't available to you. So that's another good indicator to look at, you know, how deeply do I feel? Am I actually feeling, you know, joyful? Am I feeling excited about life, or am I feeling, you know, distance from my, you know, felt sense of beingness?
Yeah. Well, I'd love to put this out to the audience. There's several of you watching, and we so appreciate you joining us live. Where do you feel closed off? I'd love to hear from the audience. Where are you feeling closed off? Where are you feeling anger and resentment right now? Where are you feeling lost? You know, I'd love to hear from you, because I think Julie and I would love to dive into some of your own examples that you have to share here. And, you know, I don't want to completely shift gears, and you know, we're halfway through already. I want to ask you, Julie, once we identify, even if it's just one thing where we've noticed that we're leaking energy in this place, we're giving our power away. Once you identify it, then there's the process of reclaiming that energy. And I'm curious for you, like, what does that look like in your own work and your work with clients on reclaiming that part of yourself that you've been giving away once you identify with it?
Well, I'm going to give you a really very simple example that I think a lot of people can relate to, and that is, you know, I think most people know that my background, my professional background, is as a teacher, right? In various formats and places, but you know, as a high school teacher in art and design. And certainly one of the big things that changed after a spiritual awakening was the way I responded and related to anybody in administration. You know, prior to this shift of consciousness, I would be a little bit anxious, you know, I'd very tentative about what I said or what I didn't say, how I presented myself. You know, it was almost kind of deferential. And this can be a common thing, I think, in the workplace. If you have a boss who, you know, even if you've got a really nice boss that you get along with, there can be this kind of inhibiting thing that happens. You know, you kind of diminish yourself for the sake of someone else. And then, you know, post-awakening, it was like the lid was blown off all of that, and I really saw it, and I saw what I'd been doing. And, you know, and obviously these are learned behaviors. And so from that point on, I just talk to whoever it is who's in charge in whatever situation, whether it's at work, a doctor, because a lot of people do it with a doctor as well. It's like speak to like, God or whatever. So those are really, really good practices to look at, to look at where do you kind of diminish yourself and almost cower, you know what I mean? When you're in conversation with somebody that you feel may have some power over you, because it's always about the power dynamic. So that's really, I think, a really great thing to look at. And it certainly does, it kind of shifts and changes of its own accord once you have a shift of consciousness, of course. But it can be quite subtle because you can be so habituated to it that you just do it automatically.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a couple great comments. So Michelle shares she's not sure what her talents are, and she also doesn't know why she's never been married or had children. And then I'll also throw out, Rick said, I just relocated to another state and have been making good progress on my spiritual journey, but I hit periods of low energy and confusion about the path forward. So two very different examples, but both good ones. So
yes, really great. Well, let me speak to Rick first of all, because I think that it's fantastic. So I can relate, and from my own direct experience. So let me think now, 2004, no, was it 2000? Yeah, 2004. My husband and I moved from, we'd been in India at an ashram. We spent time in an ashram in New York. We needed to find work. We spent time in the Ukraine, taught there, and then we came to Grand Bahama Island and we were teaching at a school there. So I'd gone from kind of a very monastic style living with meditation practices, yoga, all the wonderful supportive community, into a party city. Freeport is a kind of a party. It's quite very quiet island, but there's a big party scene because there isn't much to do. So people tend to drink, party, and so on. So I felt like a fish out of water. I did not know how to function, relate, socialize, or anything. It was, and it was really hard. So because I didn't have community, I started finding community via, and this is really probably before there was a lot of kind of YouTube channels, spiritual channels that were available. I didn't have that. So I started having an email communications with friends who had been in the ashram. And then I got this inner prompt to get hold of a journal and really dive into doing the journaling. So I'd ask questions in my journal, and then I would intuitively get the response, especially when I felt stuck. And I've shared this practice before, but this is a practice that's been like gold since I was given it. And I was given this very simple practice where you go to your journal and you ask a question, where am I in my life right now? And as the title. And then the first image, when you ask that question, the first image that comes up in your mind in response to that question, you draw it. Even if it's a stick figure and you can't draw it, it doesn't matter. You draw it. And then you do stream of consciousness writing around what you're seeing. And then you give it a title as if it's a book or a movie. And that practice, as simple as it is, and it is very, very, very powerful, and it yields the most amazing results. And I often look back in my journal. I think you and I talked about this before, but I've looked back in my journal and I said, holy moly, this is just amazing. The responses I got to that question was so on point and so detailed and so accurate with respect to what was unfolding. So for me, that phase of being in that environment that didn't feel like I was a good fit for, but it yielded the most amazing results because it was so quiet. I was able to contemplate and do the journaling, and then out of that I was prompted to write a book. And I think if I'd been somewhere that was more active socially, I probably wouldn't have the time and energy to kind of knuckle down and do that work. So anyway, I think that's worth sharing because I think that might be helpful for Rick.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, and Rick even says, thanks, Julie. I will try that exercise. I want to jump in on Michelle's never being married or had children, because I have not been able to have a biological child in this life, Michelle. So I've, done some work around this, some journaling for sure around this topic, and just want to share that that's part of the energy to reclaim, is the expectations around that, society expecting us to have that role, and also the comparison energy, comparing yourself to other people that have been married or have children. So I think looking at the expectations and the comparisons is a good place to start with your journaling, Michelle, and just looking at that. There's my favorite Osho card, or one of my favorites. There's many I love, but one of my favorites is this card called Comparison, and it's an oak and a bamboo. And it's so silly because he talks in the card about, do you think that the oak tree wishes it was more flexible than the bamboo tree? And it's just so ridiculous to think of that way, but we do that all the time, especially when it comes to children and marriage, and, oh, I'm this age and I haven't had children and I didn't do this and I didn't get married, like those kinds of things. And so looking at, why we're comparing, again, it goes back to the belonging, I think, and being part of something and comparing ourselves to others, and the society expectations of, well, I hate that word spinster. And I think that that's a word that's like a societal judgment. And so that's to me how you can start to reclaim your energy, just looking at how you're comparing, like, why are you expecting that, and are you missing something? Because that you can go deeper into what you're missing if you feel like that's something you want to create for yourself, but it's also releasing the judgment around why you haven't.
Yes. And what I would add too, I haven't had a biological child, but I've received so many messages from students and, people that I've worked with, young people that I've worked with, that have said, "You're like a mother to me." I mean, endless communications from students that I've taught. Even like 20 years later, they'll still, stop me and just say the most amazing things. And the thing is that, not every woman owes a child a life. It's just not if it's not your dharma or your duty or whatever you want to call it, then it won't happen. But it doesn't mean to say that you're not a mother. You're going to be a mother in multiple ways, in ways that you can't even imagine, when you kind of unhook from that idea or belief that something's missing, something's lacking, because it really isn't. If you were meant to be a mother and you owed a child a life, then you would be a mother. It's that simple. And what I would like to speak to is I think Michelle said that she wasn't clear about what her gifts, skills, and talents are.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been in your energetic space, but just from what I've just read and your little photo, I can tell you absolutely your gifts and skills relate to creating sacred space, a safe space. You're empathic. You're able to communicate easily. You're able to hear what people are feeling and what their state of being is. I could go on at length, but those are just some of the things that I could feel immediately as soon as I saw your photograph. So that's where I would start. And I'm obviously not telling you anything you don't already know, but your level of intuitive knowingness, your compassion, your resonance with others, your empathy. Empathy is really big in terms of your energy field. And those are certainly highly indicated in terms of your energetic imprint.
Yeah, and I'd love to offer too, the very first episode of Buddhist Biohacker was Julie and I called Dancing with the Shadow. And I just recently broke that into some sound bites. And so if you go on to the homepage of Buddhist Biohacker into videos, there's a video that I just posted recently that has a photo of Mother Teresa on it. And Julie speaks of an exercise that she did around Mother Teresa and looking at her qualities that she admires. And it's a great exercise to start with if you're looking at identifying your own gifts and talents. I'd offer that as well. So definitely check that out. So Michelle says, thank you. And Riley, welcome back in, the dynamic duo. Appreciate that so much. I feel that way, right, Julie?
Yes.
That way. You know, one of the things I want to talk about with all this, this whole idea of reclaiming our gifts and standing in our own truth, and back to this idea too of belonging, right? Belonging to a sangha, belonging to a guru's community or a teacher. You know, there comes this point where you do reclaim the energy and you are clear about your gifts, and then you have to stand on your own without any validation. And
yes.
that is tricky. And I've noticed something with my communication, mainly with family, where at the end of almost every single sentence, I say, do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? You know what I mean? And I've noticed this, and I'm looking for them to validate that they are listening. And it's awkward to sit in the silence and not say that. So it's something that I'm actively practicing for everyone out there, is to let go of saying, you know what I mean? And so I just want to put that out there and talk a little bit about like how it feels to stand in your own truth and to be comfortable not receiving validation. And, you know, within that, my run-on sentence or my run-on thought here, Julie, is here we are on YouTube and social media, and oftentimes you may not get views or comments or likes. And so that also can create and generate this like worry or concern of not being seen, right? We're looking for validation. And so how do we release the need to be validated and to stand in our own truth, even when no one else is standing there alongside of us?
Yeah, well, look, the way I would respond to that is, you know, I've always said, if only one person reads my book, you know, whichever book it is, if it only touches one person, then it will have been worth it. And you know, every single thing that I've done has really come from a command place, you know, where I've received this in a prompt, in a guidance that feels like it comes from the inner guru, and it, you know, that has this energy, this quality, and this resonance. And I just go ahead and I just do what I'm asked to do, without being concerned whether or not it'll be a hit, or, you know, if I fall flat on my face and just, you know, look like a laughing stock or whatever. I don't care. For me, what matters more than anything is that I honor my intuitive knowing, I listen to what I've been given, and I act accordingly. So I don't feel the same sting. I mean, it can be sometimes it can be a little disappointing if you've spent a lot of time, you know, on something, whether it's a course, a book, a program, whatever it is, and there isn't a great response. But I always trust that the people that are meant to find it will find it. And it doesn't matter if it's a small group, or like I said, if it's just one or two people, that's okay. You know, and I think what can happen is we can become, again, habituated to this idea that we have to be hugely successful. And, you know, really and truly, what is success? In my mind, success is amazing if at least one or two people have an awakening event because they've read a book, or they've listened or watched one of the episodes here on your channel. You know, so because that absolutely changes their whole lives. And we know this, right?
Yeah.
We know this. And of course, the thing as well is what we're offering isn't going to be hugely successful, because for the most part, most people want, you know, quick fixes, or, you know, things that are entertaining. They don't necessarily want the kind of the deeper content, and the content that is really about soul resonance and soul self-recognition and awakening to the truth of who you are. And the thing as well is that I often remember my seed guru, Bhagwan Nityananda of Ganeshpuri, you know, said you know, several times during his life that not many people came to him for truth. They would come to him because they wanted, a new car, or they wanted more money, or, they wanted a better job, or whatever it is. They didn't, and again, this is a common complaint from great beings. People don't necessarily often come, for the highest reasons. I think you have to get to a point, either in this life or next life or whenever, where you realize that nothing in the outside world, whether it's fame, money, possessions, whatever it is, although that it can be fun, it has some value, some relative value. It won't give you the deepest happiness that we're all ultimately longing for.
Yeah, a couple of anecdotes that just from what you said. One is I had a client in here last week, and I asked her, so, how's your work going? How's your inner work and journaling and all of that? And she said to me, she goes, well, she said, I've come to a big conclusion. And I was like, what's that? And she's like, there is no quick fix for what is going on with me. And I just loved the honesty of that. And we had such a great conversation for the session after that, because it is a realization of, oh, this is not going to be a quick fix or a single pill or a single thing that's going to help us. And the other thing I want to share, just with your story of what you're saying with Nityananda, I remember going to an initiation. It was the Yamantaka initiation in Long Beach with the Dalai Lama, and we were all waiting in line. There's always this big line through security to get into the building. And I had been on this little journey, this ride of initiations, and it wasn't really about the initiations at the time. For me, I was very naive, so I was kind of just going with the flow of where spirit was taking me. And I'm so grateful for that, because that initiation purifies it. The initiation itself does not purify your karma, but it plants the seed in which, if you cultivate that, you will purify all of your karma in one lifetime. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that. And so I remember standing in line at the initiation, and the energy, the clinging energy to being at that initiation from so many people that were in the line wanting to be free of this karmic cycle of samsara and reincarnation and all of these things they wanted, which is why they were there. And I'm so grateful that I went into that naive, because it kept the energy clear. Because they do go, I never in my wildest dreams thought I need to see His Holiness to do something for me. I just wanted to see him. And I think it's just amazing when you're reminded that there are people that are searching for something and want something from the guru. So going into it as open-minded as you can when you are going into any kind of talk or teaching is so important. And Riley shares, and I think it's a good point, your biggest fan probably isn't even born yet. Think about that. And I agree. We have no idea who will touch. I always think of Picasso and Hemingway and Emerson and all of these incredible writers and teachers that were just doing what they were doing, and artists. They were creating what they wanted to create. And it wasn't until they were long gone that there was value, financial value to what they were doing. And so that's something I keep in mind within myself is, just like you said, Julie, like if I can help one person with something that I wrote or something that I've said, that's enough. And you have to remind yourself of that, because our egos can easily get caught up in, I only had 15 views, or I only had this or that. So, everyone's human, and we get caught up in that, and we have to remind ourselves of what we're really doing.
Yeah. And look, the point as well is, and I'm sure you're the same, when I'm given a prompt to do something, whether it's create a course or whatever it is, I don't have a clue what I'm doing. People really don't believe me, but it's the truth. I don't have a clue. I just don't. I receive the prompt, and then I just kind of open up to source itself, through the great beings that I work with. I ask for guidance, and somehow something just lands, and I honor it, and I really trust it, and then I'll just do whatever I'm asked to do. And somehow it just always works out, you know what I mean? But I don't what I see, especially with the clients that I work with, they'll get an intuitive prompt to do something, and then they'll run it by 10 different people to ask their opinion and to get their validation. Or they'll move that prompt up into the mind and then analyze it to death and look at the good and the bad, and is it right, is it wrong, did I get it right, and all of those things. And they kind of pull all the kind of vitality out of it. It's like, taking the flesh off the bones, so to speak, and all you've got left is the carcass. So, the point is that as soon as you receive an intuitive prompt, really trust it and just follow where it leads you, and you will be given whatever you need to be given in order to get the job done. And the thing is if you don't follow that intuitive prompt, there's kind of an energy of depression that follows that, because intuitively you can feel you've missed an opportunity. And, these small steps can then kind of lead to these incredible opportunities that open up. I mean, it often boggles my mind that I'm here having this conversation with you, and that I have my own YouTube channel, and I do these interviews and do whatever. And I've written, so is it I think 7 books now.
Mm-hmm.
And because I've always been such a sort of contemplative, quiet, fairly shy. I would never have, shared anything publicly like this. But these are the things that happen once you start taking small steps and you follow your intuitive prompts, and you're just led into the most incredible opportunities that you would never have imagined before.
Mm-hmm. And denying those prompts are what diminish and deplete the energy. That's where we start to become fatigued and chronically ill and have challenges with relationships. When we're not listening to those prompts that are inviting us into, a whole different world that we weren't expecting. And absolutely, Julie, I mean, I've always said yes when I've had an intuitive prompt. And even moving to Maui, I was thinking about that the other day. I wanted to move there. I had gone through a loss, and I could have really shut down after that loss. And instead, I just started sending my resume out everywhere and got this incredible job opportunity on the island of Maui, and moved to Hawaii for a year. And it was healing, and it was profound, and it was absolutely what I needed in that moment. And had I decided, oh, that's crazy, I'm not going to do that, and never even sent my resume out, I wouldn't even have had that experience at all. So I think no matter how crazy it seems, whatever you have coming up in your mind, it's something that your soul is longing to create. And the crazy ideas are the best ones to act on, because they often turn into something that you never would have expected.
Yes, for sure. And the thing as well is we often get these kind of little prompts prior to those bigger ones landing, right? I mean, I think I've shared this before, but as a kid, whenever I would watch Jacques Cousteau and his underwater adventures on the National Geographic programs, and he'd go to Caribbean settings, and it'd be, scuba diving, looking at the corals and the beautiful fish, I just could feel it, and I knew it meant something for my life. And there I was, a little working class girl in a fairly poor family. Going on holiday wasn't even remotely possible in the UK. So, but I received that, and I knew it felt authentic, and there was a reason for it. And of course, when I came to the Bahamas and I went under the water, I saw it was the same ocean that I'd been seeing, all those years ago. So if we pay attention, there's these signs and signals that are all around us. They're always there. But again, if we're looking for someone else to validate our existence, we miss them, because we think someone else knows better than we do. And what's happening is we're just not paying attention in our own lives. However kind of gritty or grimy it may look, as mine was all those years ago, or challenging, there are always signs and symbols and messages everywhere if we pay attention.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what I understand in this present moment is, We often look for everyone outside of us to validate us, to shame us, to create expectations for us, to create roles for us, because we don't feel like we belong, because we are denying the truth of who we are, which goes back to what you said at the beginning of this, is when we experience a connection with the Shakti, however that Shakti arises, whether it's a teacher, a class, a person on the street, somebody at the grocery store, whatever, somebody here on YouTube. When we have that experience and we can see ourselves, it's harnessing that so that we see ourselves as that, and we're no longer looking outside of ourselves. And then we belong, because home is right here. This is where we belong. And when you're there, then taking these action steps is very simple.
Yes. Yeah, it's not convoluted at all. It's really easy. It's straightforward. And then, all the help we need somehow shows up. I mean, I've often shared the story about you when soon after we met. Was it 17 years ago? I think I've known you for 7.
God. 2007. Yeah. No, 2005.
Yes.
So long ago. Yeah, 20 years ago.
Yeah. So I was working with a client via a phone. I was on the phone doing a phone session. I was in the UK. She was in, I think, Colorado, actually. Mm-hmm. And you'd recommended her. She contacted me. And anyway, so at the end of the session, she said to me, "Oh my God, Julie, this is amazing. Do you have a website?" I said, "No, I've been told that several times. I really need to look at creating a website." She said, "Well, do you have a blog?" "No, I don't have a blog, but, I'm going to look at the website." So then we fly back to Grand Bahama, and lo and behold, there's an email from you saying, "Hey, I've just signed up for this platform." I forget the name of it now, but anyway, was it Homestead? It was a Homestead. Yeah.
You should check so many platforms ago.
Yes, you should check it out. And so I took that. I said, okay, that's a sign. I went straight on. I signed up immediately. I got started. Didn't know what the heck I was doing, but I just trusted the process. And of course, these things become second nature. They happen more and more and more and more and more the more you trust that intuitive knowing, and you just take the first step. It's like the entire universe starts to kind of move in motion with you taking that step and saying yes to what you've been guided to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're already at an hour, Julie. How do you want to close today?
Let me think. So I think it would be really good to invite everybody who's watching to just, take some time and look at your life, look at every aspect of your life, and ask one very simple question. In my relationships, in my work, in my spiritual work, in my activities, where do I give my power away? And how can I bring it back? And, just those simple questions. Inherent in the question is always the answer. But I would definitely look, and you can list those kind of each area of your life. If it makes it easier, but just ask that simple question: where do I give my energy away, energy and power away? And, how can I bring it back? And another question you could ask is, what would it feel like to be fully standing in the expansion and in the vitality and then in the radiance of my authentic power and beingness? What would that be like? How would I express myself? And those very simple self-inquiry questions really will yield a lot.
I love it. And all of our information is in the show notes, but for our audio listeners, Julie, how do they find you and what do you have upcoming?
They can find me on my website, juliehoyle.org. I'm also here on YouTube at Julie, let me think. Talking True with Julie Hoyle, that's right. I've changed it a few times, right? Talking True with Julie Hoyle. I have a lot of fun on my channel. And then, I'm doing my usual thing. I offer one-on-one sessions, soul purpose readings, shadow work sessions. I've got a couple of courses on there as well. Of course, I've got my books as well. And the latest one is about reigniting your creative fire and energy. And that's been going really well. And yeah, I'm here. People can find me. People can reach out. If you have a question, you can email me at truealignment@yahoo.com. And I respond. I won't just ignore your questions or your messages, and I'll get back to you.
I love it. Well, Julie, as always, I could do this all day with you. Thank you so much for being here and for being a part of our One Heart, One Earth Global Healing Summit. For everybody out there, if you're looking for any of our OHO summits, they are all available on my website at buddhistbiohacker.com. And just go to the courses page. We have 14 online courses you can take right now. And 5 of them are the OHO Summit experiences that we have available. So you can find them there. And thank you so much. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment to both myself and Talking True with Julie Hoyle on her YouTube channel. She's got great content there as well. Thank you, Julie, so much. I love you so much.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Same to you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.